Where's my gunner? No more than two, didn't I? Greetings. My name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the Core New Core, and anyone interested in surviving and thriving as a Pilates instructor. 4 titles today. Number 1 is The Year Ahead, Anticipation with an arrow to realization. Number 2 is Looking for Presenters. Number 3 is Mark Spinard is the best. And number 4 is Foot Corrector 1 and 2. So, the foot corrector came into it just before coming to broadcast, and it pleases me to have show and tell within the light of illuminating the MMP point of view and the distinction it may have in where classical stops and MMP goes. It transcends to something beyond what exists within classical that can only be considered for what it is without moving beyond it, right? Otherwise it wouldn't be classical. So that's why MMP is neoclassical, because there's someplace new based on the classical, and the new is the idea of uniform eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement being a definition for what is ideal in Joe's original work based on his definition, his promise, and his sequence that you find in his book, Return to Life Through Contrology. No, the co-author is no relation to me. Number 1, the year ahead, realization, or anticipation and realization. From a perspective of a Pilates performer doing the work, because you're familiar with the routine, there's anticipation at different times when I'm working out doing the mat. There's either fear and regret, but there's an anticipation of what is to come because of the familiarity of the pattern. Okay? And that anticipation becomes realization when it gets there. And my point is that part of the depth of the moment that you're in making your effort of doing your movement, part of that can come from the anticipation of it before it gets there. Right? Number 2, looking for presenters. You know this, right? On Udemy, udemy.com, U-D-E-M-Y, there's a half-constructed course on how to survive as a Pilates instructor, and that shows 5 videos. Oh, I didn't mean to go this way, because one video is Joe's definition, one video is Joe's promise, and do I have a video on his whole sequence? If I don't, I ought to, but I think I do. Like saying through, walking through, naming, like going through the alphabet, but going through the mat. Being able to name the exercises in the order that they're in. Okay? That's the 3rd thing. And to be a presenter, you have to have you have to know the definition of core new tension. Even if you don't have it as a feeling in your own body, if you know the definition, that may help you get there in terms of it becoming sensational. And then the fifth thing we've already mentioned, and that's the definition of the ideal, as the view of a brand of Pilates, MMP, and that definition is uniform eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement. Okay? So I'm looking for presenters that are willing to have me create the banner with Cornu and an agreement about how things happen. But for the most part, I would just do it. If I were me, I would just go out and make a presentation. And don't rip off my trademark, but you can point to it on a computer screen or a projector of a big screen, right? Don't customize my brand with your name without my permission, and I'm willing to do that. And that would be an agreement to make you an official MMP LP, a Michael Miller Pilates licensed presenter. You don't have to be an affiliate if you don't want that, those rights and such, but just to be a presenter and have your name. I should get a poster. Hold on. Look at that. It's within reach. You know, I've been organizing the archives. And that's the letter E, the note E, in case. All right. How about that for archive? You don't see this in color, but that's the cosmos. Why am I taking you here? I'm taking you here for having your name on something like this, where it's a workshop, and you just, but it's not necessarily even a workshop. I'm just looking for presenters. Just go make a presentation to other people about 3 things that's in Joe's book, and then the 2 things from MMP. And go from where? From conventional, contemporary, status quo to someplace new. And if you're going to do that, it's best to introduce core nutension first, which is biomechanics in the body that got its name from me because I'm the one that's identifying it as such. And if it doesn't exist, you go right ahead and let your mind try to convince my mind, but I have a sensation of oppositional rotation between axes, and that's where sharing to every human being, everybody. And that's why it's on a more applicable plane, or it applies to every human being that they use these kind of biodynamics, biomechanics in their body to move through space. And from engaging in those biomechanics, have a sensational feedback from the engagement of alignment. It's only bad news for people that want to make believe there isn't more to what they already know. Number 3, which is a lead-in to number 4, because in talking about foot correctors, it's not fair not to give a whole title all by itself to the statement that Mark Spinard is the best. Mark Spinard is the best. And by best, I mean the best Pilates equipment manufacturer ever. Now, immediately I have all kinds of chorus going to make clarifications or distinctions And you're all welcome to that, okay? But as a craftsman, manufacturing Pilates equipment, manufacturing anything really, Mark Spinard is the best. Really, manufacturing anything. Even to the point of his designs on things being totally copied without compensation, because they could be. And because it takes a craftsman longer than a day to do their work, and the tsunami wave of passion has no patience, I don't think he's doing, if he's making equipment, he's doing it completely secretly for private clients, and I'm sure that they're paying him a fortune, or he wouldn't be doing it and be worth it. So that's why I say, in number 3, Mark Spinard is the best. And I always told him, while he was still talking to me, that if I could instruct as well as he could build, I would be more than happy. Okay? So, I started with a reformer that was given to me in exchange for lessons built by someone other than Mark. And still have it and still use it. But when it came time to actually establish my own studio, Mark made all of my other equipment. The Cadillac and the chair with the adapter to the high chair. And the barrel, the ladder barrel, oh my God. And you don't mean to go right by the Cadillac. You can see all of it, all of it. In that regard, though, we're going to move from talking about a craftsman and his art to a piece of Pilates equipment that you may recognize as the foot corrector. Okay? This is built by Mark Spinard, and of course has springs. I knew I had a serious student in residence when we had agreed to meet downstairs in my living room at 7 o'clock for a lesson, and at 6:30 I heard the squeaking sounds of the foot corrector being used as part of their warm-up before the session to start, in 30 minutes, right? Why is this a piece of Pilates equipment? That's a good place to start, right? And there's one really big reason, and that's because Joe had one. Joe had them built, right? And the ones he had built were metal, more like a metal shoe, and which is another piece of apparatus. Mark Spinard was much like Joe in that he manufactured things that people never thought of before. And yet, the essential part to this is what? Is there's a flat surface and there's this curve here that's got springs resisting the push down, but in the resistance there is tension to be had and absorbed within our body. Okay? So, a means of instilling flexibility in the feet. Because if feet don't get flexed, they turn solid like lumps of clay, bricks. And just stamping your foot on the ground as a way of waking it up can be extreme before you ever get to putting a foot up here and pushing down on it. There's only 3 exercises, from my point of view, of the classical representation of the foot corrector. And one of them is like I showed you, like this. And one of them I showed you is like this. And one of them is like this. Okay? Those are the only 3 options from the original work, of the classical work, of the implementation of the foot corrector. Now, don't argue with me, just have your view of what you believe to be classical, and I'll have mine. Okay? Coming from that, there's an order to doing it, to doing those 3 foot positions. So my question to you is, do you know what the order is on those 3 positions? And then beyond that, of course, at Michael Miller Pilates, do you know why? Because Michael Miller Pilates is the only brand of Pilates that explains why Pilates is what it is. Let that sink in a minute. So that I don't talk forever about a very interesting subject, the 3 positions are this way first, where this is your heel, like the heel of my hand, the heel of your foot, and this way with your toes, pressing down. You get off into breath. And then this way is anchored from the toe and pressing down, is second. And this way, unanchored, is third. Does that make sense to you? Because Pilates moves from the center out. And so the first thing to have anchored would be your heel, and then to encounter tension beyond that. All right? And then beyond that, the next thing anchored would be ball of foot, and anchored back, and you're anchored from your ball of foot metatarsals to this, until you actually can allow your foot to drape over this arc like you let your body drape over the ladder barrel. So as a workshop conductor, it's always interesting to say, okay, what's the smallest barrel in the studio? And if this is a really well-established studio, there's a lot of barrels around, okay? Half barrels, spine correctors, mini arcs, fabricated plastic things you never knew existed, that kind of thing, right? What's the smallest barrel in the studio? And what is a barrel in terms of the abstraction of what we're dealing with is a curve, right? A curve. A barrel is a curve. And the degree of the curve has something to say about the strength of the curve, especially when it comes to load bearing. Namely the catenary and the St. Louis arch. But in this case, it's not in that shape, it's just a curve, and knowing your Pilates stuff in terms of knowing that you come from the center out, and here's a contact point with the heel first, and you engage in this tension from an anchored point, you go to anchored out at the metatarsals, I've been through this already, to here, 1, 2, 3, right? What movement, so that's it in the classical purist realm of things. That's what to me comes straight from Joe, of him, by him, and those were the 3 things you did on the foot corrector. Now, stepping back to looking at Pilates in a bigger level, just like this is the smallest barrel, and there are other barrels, when the body is moving or using the barrels, what are they doing? Yes, they're providing stretch and allowing for decompression and elongation. But when we're holding our body in space in the shape of a barrel, a curve, right, then how do we establish that curve? Well, in the MMP world, the endpoints of rotation in our body line up on that curve. Hips, shoulders, and ears, 3 points on a smooth curve is the way toward uniform engagement in the body. What is Pilates? Well, within MMP, it's a progressive pattern of movement, for one thing, and that's flexion, extension, side bending, rotation, and torsion. And if it were your body doing Pilates, whether you're using a ladder barrel or a big ball or anything else, the pattern of the body is flexion before extension, but controlling this plane in space, the midline, and then the lateral plane in space at 90 degrees, because that's all the space that there is. And in the conditioning, we're trying to be as present or take up as much space as there is in our capacity to move. So what movement pattern is this in the foot? Well, I'd call that flexion, wouldn't you? And I'd also call this flexion. And I'd also call this flexion. So you can make up whatever you wish. And in the case of MMP, because it looks at Pilates in an ideal way, and that there's a progressive pattern of things, then after flexion would come extension. And so after having your foot like this, and your toes curled, trying to curl your toes into an extension in the foot, makes the sense that it's not flexion, it goes sensationally in the opposite direction, but in the same plane. I'm loving this. And so putting this on a reformer to where a person can hold on to the lifted bar and act like they're going to do the split with one foot on the ground. But instead of having the foot up against the shoulder rest, have this near the shoulder rest so that the foot can be turned over and that you can work extension. And, you know, if you had a thing from Mark Spinard, you'd have an extra set of springs. To do what? To cover a bigger range of tension in your device, right? Because it's about tension, right? And in this case, it's about taking this piece of equipment and knowing that after all this flexion in the foot can do this, the foot can make extension just like the rest of the body. So putting the device in a position to allow the foot to engage in extension makes sense to me. And it made so much sense to me that I asked Mark to make a foot corrector that would allow the foot to move in a smooth curve in 90 degrees. 90 degrees. Boom to boom, 90 degrees. I've been so blessed in my associations. So Mark not only have made, these are pretty rare in the world out there, his foot corrector, but he also made the foot corrector 2. And why the foot corrector 2? Why the foot corrector 2? Why? You know why, right? Because after flexion and extension, there's side bend, there's side bending, right? There's this way. And so with a foot corrector that's this long, here we go. With a foot corrector this long, you can get a long foot on this and get engagement that allows the foot to expand this way and articulate through a line of tension down the midline of the foot. I don't know if that's technically correct saying it that way, but down the line of the foot, right? So when you talk to other equipment manufacturers, ask them why they don't make a foot corrector 2, and they may have their reasons, but at least you'll know why one exists, so that you can. And so, to be sensational and to work cross-brained in the body, the way it's wired, I like to put these at the end of the Cadillac and let a person hold on to the Cadillac, the vertical bars of the Cadillac, and put 1 foot in flexion and extension on this one, and 1 foot bending sideways on this one, and have them rock back and forth. Now their feet have to really be able to handle so much expansion, right? And that's a long way from just doing 1 foot at a time this, to engender expansion and flexion, to taking the known into the pattern by turning the body over and making extension against the tension, to then having the wonder of being able to then take the foot and work it in tension this way, right? And when you put someone rocking back and forth, and then you have them step off, and you pull it away, and you reverse it, right? There's all of this sensory input that is right for the human being taking control of that, being more aware of that, and especially in terms of the alignment. You know, there's in the short one, there's not much, but when you have a long one and your foot's this way, and you then try to roll up through the ball of your foot, what does this mean? All right. See, the idea lets you go places, not only in what your choices of exercises you make, but in the equipment you design. And in that case of a foot corrector 2, the foot corrector 2 came out of Mark Spinard's genius of manufacturing, but governed by or directed by the ideal pursuit of allowing the body to stretch sideways as well as down the midline. Maybe I just said frontways. there's all kinds of Pilates out there in the tsunami, and as much as it's consolidation is happening, and big money is making its presentation like everyone else does. I'm encouraging you to learn about what you don't know when it comes to CT and MMP, because the 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 nature of the tsunami of Pilates passion, I've seen tsunamis are such terrible things, especially when they're unknown. You don't see them coming. My heart goes out and prayers go out to all the people in the tsunami just recently in Indonesia. So be a leader, be a presenter, and know what you don't know. And be willing to learn what you may not want to find out about, but you will if you're serious about, I can't throw those away yet, if you're serious about taking your Pilates to an ideal perspective. And if not, then no, listen no more. And don't waste your time, because life can't live forever. Read between the lines and see behind the curtain and add to it to direct your thinking. Geist.